Pagurus pygmaeus, Bouvier, 1918, family Paguridae. This rare species was found on Curaçao only in a few restricted localities. A total of about 70 individuals were collected. Only 2 specimens of this species, one of them the holotype, had been collected prior to this. Provenzano, Personal Communication. It is a small species, however, not quite as small as Pagurus miamensis, averaging about 3.5 millimeters in cephalothorax length. The previously undescribed color pattern is very striking. The antennules are light, transparent blue. The antennae faintly purple with white bands, eye stalks clear, cephalothorax creamish with a green tinge, chelipeds and the first 2 proximal segments of each walking leg a brilliant, vivid scarlet. Number 4D6 in Mertz and Paul, A Dictionary of Color. And the distal segments of the ambulatories are colored by sequential bands of light blue, orange, dark blue, light blue, orange, yellow, dark blue, light blue, yellow. The bands of color go completely around the legs. The tips of the cheliped dactyls are light scarlet to white. The eggs are yellow-orange. Morphologically, Pagurus pygmaeus is more closely related to P. miamensis than to any other species studied. Specimens of Pagurus pygmaeus were numerous only at Boca Saint Mihiel. A few were found at Versen Bay and on one side of the entrance to Piscadera Bay. This species is limited to waters with open circulation. More restrictive is the apparent requirement for an aggregate of medium to large rocks, with space between them and covered with a heavy, encrusting, red-scarlet algal growth, instead of the usual brown or green algae or detritus. The crabs were found in 1 meter or less of water, and during the day were always hidden beneath the rocks and stones. The populations at Boca Saint Mihiel lived mainly under some artificially constructed rock piles, built by the fishermen of that village as water breakers. Populations of Pagurus miamensis and Pilopagurus operculatus were present in the same microenvironment. The aggressive behavior patterns of Pagurus pygmaeus rather closely resemble those of P. miamensis. The ambulatory raise may involve one or both first ambulatories. The limb is raised through about 35 degrees to a position about 25 degrees below the horizontal. The proximal segments of the limb are actually held at an angle above the horizontal. The leg is not maintained straight, but is bent in such a way that the distal segments are at the above-mentioned angle. The movement upward takes up to 0.54 seconds. The downward motion is sometimes more rapid than the upward, 0.30 seconds. The movements of the chelipeds are more frequent in aggressive interactions in Pagurus pygmaeus. The cheliped presentation behavior pattern is similar to that described for P. miamensis. The minor cheliped is extended to an almost completely horizontal position. The proximal segments of the major cheliped may be horizontal in the raised attitude. However, the dactyl is held about 35 degrees below the horizontal. The upward motion takes 0.42 to 0.54 seconds. Because pygmaeus carries its major dactyl doubled back below the mouth area when not aggressively engaged, the dactyl is moved through about 135 degrees. Individuals of Pagurus pygmaeus often show the dislodging shaking mentioned under P. miamensis. The behavior pattern appears to be similar in the 2 species. Shell fighting in Pagurus pygmaeus contains the same behavioral elements as other pagurid crabs, although wrapping movements occur more than the spasmodic shaking, which predominates in other pagurids. During positioning behavior, the aggressor rotates the defending crab back and forth rapidly about an axis perpendicular to and through the plane of the defender's aperture. After these short movements, the attacking crab begins either wrapping or spasmodic shaking. Most of the wrapping occurs at a rate of about 0.8 seconds per cycle. In one long series of short, rapid wrapping motions, an attacking crab wrapped the defending crab 113 times in 1 minute. Although some hard wrapping does occur, in which the attacker's shell is moved through a distance equal to half the length of the cephalothorax, the majority of motions are about the length of the eye stalks. The sexual behavior of Pagurus pygmaeus is noticeably different from that of P. miamensis and other pagurid crabs. Mating activity and copulation were observed only 3 times. In each case, copulation was achieved after less than 10 minutes of pre-copulatory behavior. None of the jerking movements seen in miamensis were observed. After turning a female over into an opposed position, the male placed both chelipeds into the aperture of the female. Occasionally he held his minor cheliped still and moved the major dactyl back and forth just inside the shell hole, wrapping the sides lightly. The most consistent and constant male behavior pattern was a series of movements of the minor cheliped inside the aperture of the female. The motions included both vertical, horizontal, and diagonal elements. The vertical movements were the most marked, and the male appeared to move his appendage up and down in all parts of the female aperture. After several minutes of these cheliped movements, the female came up and began tapping alternately with her major and minor cheliped at the area just below the male's eye stalks. While the female continued the tapping motions, the male started to come out of his shell farther and grasped one of the female ambulatories with his minor cheliped and sometimes grasped another with his major. As he eased out, the male appeared to pull at the grasped limbs of the female, spreading them apart. The male sometimes then tapped at the outspread ambulatories of the female with either cheliped, as the pair attained the copulatory position. Once in the copulatory position, the pair was always quiet except for the movement of the male's 5th periopods between the genital openings. Post-copulatory behavior on the part of the male was totally absent in one case. However, in this case, the female had not molted recently, and copulation itself lasted 40 seconds. In the other 2 cases, in which the females were soft from recent molts, copulation lasted 5 seconds and was followed by elements of shell-fighting behavior by the male. This consisted of about a minute of short wrapping and rotations in one case. In the other, the male first performed a peculiar behavior pattern seen only this one time. It was a type of inverse wrapping, in which the male shell was motionless while the bodies of the male and female were moved back and forth in short movements as the male pulled in and out of this shell. The male was holding a female ambulatory leg with his major cheliped. After a number of these movements, the male went through rocking rotating movements, positioning behavior, and then true wrapping behavior. After a number of wraps, the female came completely out of her shell and the pair exchanged shells. In the mated pairs, the males were 8 to 67% larger than the females, average 30%. New eggs were not yet in place in any of the females when extracted from their shells, up to 2 hours after copulation, although new eggs were visible in their abdomen. The diel variation in activity of Pagurus pygmaeus was measured as in Clibinarius tricolor. The results are shown in Figure 23. This species is clearly nocturnal in its activity. Figure 23. Diel variation in activities of Pagurus pygmaeus. All activities nocturnal with crepuscular peaks.